Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get you straight to the fascinating core of complex topics. And today, we're plunging into something that affects, well, millions of us globally, running. It's one of the most popular ways to stay fit, clear our heads, maybe challenge ourselves. But here's the twist, maybe a surprising one.
Yeah.
Despite all that healthy activity, running comes with a significant downside,
Right.
a really, really high incidence of injuries.
It's absolutely true. And, while runners often focus on things like the latest shoes or perfecting their technique.
Right, the gear, the form.
Exactly. There's a crucial factor, often overlooked, I think, in injury prevention, the actual running surface itself. And that's something, unlike maybe your genetics, you can actually choose.
That's such a great point, and that's really our mission today. We're going to unpack a really interesting 2023 study.
Yeah, this one's good.
It was published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, and it's called An Analysis of Running Impact on Different Surfaces for Injury Prevention. So this deep dive is going to reveal how they use some innovative sensor tech to precisely measure the real impact different running surfaces have on your body.
Yeah, getting down to the nitty-gritty forces.
Exactly. Our goal, to arm you with insights so you can run smarter, maybe stay a bit healthier. Let's get into it.
Okay, so when we talk about running injuries, the sheer volume of stress is, well, it's kind of mind-boggling.
How so?
Consider this. Someone running just 32 kilometers a week, that's about 20 miles.
Pretty standard for many runners.
Right. They can experience an astounding 1.3 million impacts per year.
Wow. 1.3 million.
Yeah, that's an incredible amount of repetitive strain on the body.
When you put it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's no wonder then that a vast majority of these injuries, I think the number is around 58% in amateur runners.
That sounds about right.
They hit the lower limbs. The knee seems to be a major hot spot, right?
Right.
Accounting for a huge chunk of injuries.
Definitely. The knee is often the most common site, yeah. Followed closely by the lower leg, the foot, and the upper leg too. Ankle and hip injuries happen, but maybe a bit less frequently.
Okay. And beyond the surface, we know there are other contributing factors. You mentioned shoes, technique.
For sure. Your running shoes, your specific technique, maybe running too much too soon, high weekly training volume, or even just, a lack of adequate preparation or conditioning.
Right.
But as this study really highlights, the running surface itself, it's a factor that's often, I think, severely underestimated in its role.
So if the surface matters that much, how did these researchers actually measure the impact? What kind of tech are we talking about here?
Well, they used accelerometers. These are essentially tiny sensors that quantify impact.
Okay.
And when we talk about impact here, we mean both the sort of general force and the maximum jolts or acceleration peaks your body experiences with each step.
So the sharp forces.
Exactly. These sensors let them pinpoint the intensity and the frequency of those forces, which are, critical variables for assessing injury risk.
Okay, so accelerometers.
Yeah.
How did they actually set up the experiment? Who participated?
So the participants were 30 amateur runners. They were all sports sciences students, average age around 22, 23.
Young, fit group then.
Yeah, and crucially, they all had at least 2 years of running experience, and importantly, no recent lower limb injuries. So that gave them a pretty consistent group for collecting data.
Makes sense. And the actual running part, what did that look like?
The setup itself was quite clever, actually. Each runner did a single continuous 120-meter trial,
Okay.
but that 120 meters was broken up. It was divided into 3 40-meter sections, each on a different surface.
So they hit
Sure.
all 3 surfaces in one go. Which ones?
Synthetic track, like you find on an athletics field, then grass, and finally concrete.
The big 3 for many runners.
Exactly. And they ran at a consistent speed, 3.3 meters per second, which is a steady pace, roughly a 9-minute mile. And here's an important detail. They wore their own running shoes.
Oh, interesting. Not standardized lab shoes.
No. Which, it really mirrors real-world running conditions better, I think.
Yeah, that makes a difference. So what makes this study stand out then? You mentioned innovative tech.
Right. What makes this study particularly insightful is where they placed the sensors. Most previous research has attached accelerometers down on the lower limbs, like the shin bone, the tibia.
Okay, feeding that.
But this study used a wireless multi-sensor unit placed much higher up on the sacrum.
The sacrum, that's the triangular bone at the base of the spine, right?
Exactly. Closer to the body's center of mass.
And what's the advantage of putting it there? What does that tell us that a sensor on the shin wouldn't?
Well, putting the sensor on the sacrum gives you a more global view, you could say.
Global.
Yeah, it shows how impacts affect the entire locomotor system, including your spine. It provides a broader picture of how those impact forces are attenuated.
Attenuated meaning.
Oh, gosh.
Cushioned.
Yeah.
Reduced.
Precisely. How much their force is reduced as they travel up your body, rather than just capturing what's happening right down at the lower leg. It's like getting a more complete report on the body's shock absorption system.
I see. That makes sense. A whole body perspective. And what specific information, what metrics were they gathering from these sacrum sensors?
They really honed in on a few key measures to understand the impact. There was the average force, they called it mean total acceleration, or MA.
Okay, average hit.
Then the absolute biggest jolts, the mean peak total acceleration, PA.
Hardest hits.
Right. And then, crucially, how many of those jolts reach particularly high magnitudes. They categorized these by G-forces, like how many peaks were between 2 and 3G or 4 and 5G. That was NI, number of impacts by intensity.
Ah, okay. So not just how hard, but how often those really hard hits occurred.
Exactly. And finally, they just counted the number of running steps, NS, over each 40-meter section. Stride count, basically.
Got it. Average force, peak force, number of high force peaks, and step count. Seems comprehensive.
Yeah, these measures gave them a really complete picture of what was happening biomechanically.
Okay, so with all that clever methodology in place, let's get to the juicy part. What did they actually find? What did the surfaces show?
Well, the main takeaway was crystal clear. The running impacts definitively differed based on the surface type.
No ambiguity there.
None. This isn't just, runners feeling like one surface is harder. It's scientifically measured, quantified difference.
And concrete. How did that stack up against grass and the track?
Well, when they looked at concrete versus the others, the data was very consistent. Concrete showed higher forces.
Higher how?
Running on concrete consistently resulted in higher mean acceleration, that's the MA, and higher mean peak acceleration, the PA, compared to both the synthetic track and the grass.
Okay, so just generally more force, higher peaks on concrete. Can we quantify that? How much higher?
Yeah, the MA on concrete was about 3.0 to 3.7% higher, and the PA, those peaks, were about 3.6 to 5.6% higher than on track or grass.
Okay, 3 to 6% higher peak sources.
Yeah.
It might not sound like a huge number in isolation, but multiply that by 1.3 million impacts a year.
Exactly. It adds up. This strongly implies runners are subjected to greater biomechanical loads on concrete. And the likely reason is just less impact attenuation from that hard, unforgiving surface.
Right, it just doesn't absorb the shock nearly as well.
Precisely. It gives less.
Now, you mentioned they also looked at the number of peaks at different intensities. What did that show?
And here's where the findings, they got really interesting. Kind of a surprising twist, actually. While concrete had those higher magnitude accelerations, overall, it actually had a lower total number of acceleration peaks.
Wait, fewer peaks overall on concrete?
Yeah. Roughly 70 peaks on concrete over the 40-meter, compared to about 74 on the synthetic track, and nearly 77 on grass.
That is surprising.
Yeah.
So fewer impacts means less stress, right?
You'd think so. But here's the kicker, the real aha moment in the data.
Oh.
Concrete showed a significantly higher number of high-magnitude peaks, specifically in that more intense 4 to less than 5G range.
So fewer hits overall, but more the really hard ones.
Exactly. We're talking around 36 to 37% more peaks in that high G-force range on concrete compared to synthetic track and grass.
Wow, okay, that flips the intuition. It's It's like taking fewer punches, maybe, but each one is way more powerful. A knockout blow.
That's a good analogy. It suggests concrete might deliver fewer total impacts, but the impacts it does deliver are substantially harder on the system.
That's fascinating. Did they see anything else? Like, did runners change how they ran on the different surfaces?
They did, yeah. The study also uncovered some interesting things about running technique changes. They found a higher number of steps, meaning a higher stride frequency on the synthetic track and grass compared to concrete.
So more steps per minute on the softer surfaces.
Correct. For the same 40-meter distance, runners took about 33 steps on concrete versus almost 35 on the synthetic track and nearly 36 on grass.
So if we connect that to the bigger picture, what does that suggest?
Well, it suggests our bodies are pretty smart, actually. They subtly adapt technique based on the surface. It's almost like your body's having this little internal conversation. Okay, surface feels hard. Maybe shorten the stride, take quicker steps.
Right, trying to cushion the blow, maybe?
Potentially, yeah. But here's where it gets complicated. Previous research, not this specific study, but others, indicates that reducing your stride frequency, which is what they saw on concrete.
Taking longer strides.
Right. That can actually increase the vertical acceleration forces on your tibia, your shin bone.
Oh. So the body's attempt to adapt might actually increase stress in another area.
It's possible, yeah. Your body tries to compensate, but the way it does so might, over the long term, inadvertently contribute to injury risk in certain spots. It's complex.
Wow, okay. So let's bring this all together. What does this mean for your running, for the average person listening? Why is concrete seemingly tougher?
Well, it comes down to those forces. The higher accelerations generally, and especially that higher number of high-magnitude jolts on concrete, it just translates directly to greater biomechanical loads on your body.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple. Your system is working harder, absorbing more shock with each step.
And you mentioned fatigue earlier. How does that play into this? Because the study was just short sprints, right?
Exactly. This study didn't directly look at fatigue over longer distances, but we know from other research that fatigue can dramatically increase impact acceleration, perhaps by as much as 50%.
50%, that's huge.
It is. Now think about how many popular long-distance races, like marathons or half marathons, are run primarily on concrete or asphalt roads.
Most of them, yeah.
So as you get tired in those later miles, those already harder impacts on concrete could be significantly amplified. That fatigue factor could really ramp up the injury risk.
That's a sobering thought for a race day.
And then there were those technique adaptations we talked about. Right. The observed change in stride frequency clearly shows that your body, subtly, or maybe not so subtly, alters its running form based on the terrain. It's this dynamic interaction between you and the ground beneath you.
Okay. Now, like any good piece of research, this study must have had some limitations, right? Things it didn't look at.
Oh, absolutely. And the researchers are usually upfront about these. For instance, this study didn't explore the effects of different running velocities. How would impacts change if people ran faster or slower on these surfaces?
Good point. Pace matters.
Definitely. And as we just discussed, they didn't analyze the effect of fatigue over longer distances, which is a huge real-world factor.
Right. What else? You mentioned they wore their own shoes.
Yeah, which is good for real-world validity, but the specific characteristics of those shoes, how worn they were, the brand, the cushioning technology, the quality, none of that was controlled or analyzed.
So shoe differences could have influenced the results a bit.
Potentially, yeah. It's a variable. And finally, they didn't compare results between male and female runners, which could potentially reveal some biomechanical differences too.
Okay. And maybe one more point, not really a limitation of this study's findings, but you mentioned the sensor placement.
Right. There's still, ongoing discussion in the research community about the best place to put these sensors. This study's sacrum placement gave us that unique global view, which is valuable. But it also highlights why researchers are still working towards standardizing these methods so we can compare data more easily across different studies. Getting consensus is important.
Makes sense. So despite those limitations, what's the big key takeaway for you, the runner listening right now?
I think the key takeaway is really clear. The surface you choose to run on undeniably impacts the forces your body has to absorb.
It matters.
It really matters. And this study strongly confirms that running on concrete surfaces does result in higher impact accelerations, particularly those high magnitude ones, which over time can significantly increase your risk of injury.
Okay, so concrete is demonstrably harder on the body. What's the practical advice then? What should people do with this information?
Well, first, maybe think about variety. Train your body to withstand different loads by running on different surfaces. Don't just, pound the pavement every single day.
Mix it up.
Yeah, mix it up. For your general training, maybe your easy runs, consider surfaces like synthetic tracks or even grass if it's available and safe. They seem to produce fewer peak accelerations overall, giving your body a bit of a break.
Makes sense. You softer surfaces for the bulk of the mileage, maybe?
That could be a good strategy for many people, yeah. And if you are training for a race that's mostly on concrete or asphalt,
like most road races.
Right. Maybe limit your concrete running to those specific sessions where you need to simulate race conditions, your key workouts, maybe some long runs closer to the event. Don't make concrete your default surface for all your runs.
Okay, be strategic about concrete running. That seems actionable.
Mm-hmm.
This brings up an interesting question based on what you said about stride frequency. Yeah. When you're running on concrete, could consciously trying to increase your stride frequency, taking slightly shorter, quicker steps, could that actually help reduce those high-impact accelerations? And maybe, consequently, lower your injury risk on that surface?
That's a really interesting thought. The study showed people naturally decreased frequency on concrete, which might increase tibial shock.
Mm.
So consciously doing the opposite, increasing cadence.
Taking more steps per minute.
Yeah. It's plausible that it could help mitigate some of that peak impact force. It's definitely something worth perhaps experimenting with carefully in your own running practice, maybe focusing on landing lighter and quicker.
Food for thought, definitely.
Absolutely. So maybe the next time you head out the door, you plan your run. Just take a second to ask yourself, is the path you usually take the best one for your body long term? Is it a shortcut to fitness or maybe an unforeseen hurdle?
Yeah, how might understanding these subtle but significant impacts,
Yeah.
how might that reshape your long-term running journey, helping you stay on the road or the trail or the track, feeling healthy and strong?
It's all about running smarter, isn't it? Not just harder.